The night was supposed to be quiet. My newborn's tiny breaths were still damp against my chest as I rocked her in the dark, whispering lullabies I learned in childhood. But peace doesn't last long when you're a black woman in the wrong neighborhood. The flashing red and blue lights cut through my curtains like jagged knives. My heart froze. Tires screeched outside, doors slammed, and then came the bark, low, guttural, trained. K9 units. I knew that sound better than I knew my own heartbeat. It was the sound of war. The sound that had followed me across deserts and ruined cities, when I was the one giving the orders. But now, I was standing barefoot in my own living room, clutching a baby the world didn't think I should have, facing men who saw me as nothing more than a threat. And here's the cruelest irony, they had no idea. No idea I used to command dogs deadlier than theirs. No idea I had once worn the uniform they saluted. No idea that the woman they thought wasn't good enough was about to show them what survival really looked like. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for epic stories. All my life, I've been told I wasn't enough. Not soft enough to be a mother. Not tough enough to be a soldier. Not obedient enough to be a daughter. My family made sure I never forgot it. Why can't you just be like your sister? My mother would say, shaking her head at every decision I made. At least she followed the rules. You always have to fight. And maybe she was right. Fighting was the only thing I knew. But holding my baby now, listening to the officers outside shout commands, I felt that same fire rising in me. Only this time, I wasn't fighting for approval. I wasn't fighting for medals. I was fighting for my child. Through the thin walls, I heard the sharp clicks of leashes unfastening. The dogs snarled, muscles coiled, hungry for release. And that was their first mistake. Because if there's one thing I know better than anyone, it's how to control a beast. I tightened my grip on my baby, pressing her small head against my chest to shield her from the chaos brewing outside. Her breath was warm and steady, innocent, while mine came sharp and jagged. From the street, heavy boots stomped closer. The kind of stomp that came with arrogance. The kind of stomp that said, "We own this ground, not you. Step outside with your hands where we can see them," a voice barked, deep and commanding. I froze. The baby whimpered softly. Another officer shouted, "We've got dogs, don't make us use them." The corner of my mouth twitched. Don't make us use them? These men had no idea. I whispered against my baby's ear, low and steady. "It's okay, sweet girl. Mama knows their language better than they do." But in my mind, old voices came rushing back. "Cadet Carter, again. Control the dog, don't let the dog control you." My instructor's tone was sharp, cutting into my memory. I was younger then, standing on a sandy training ground, sweat dripping into my eyes as a Belgian Malinois lunged for my arm. Everyone thought I would quit. I didn't. Back in the present, I stepped toward the front door. My knees trembled, but my hands were steady, the way they always were in combat. I eased the door open, just enough to see the cluster of officers and the shadows of their snarling K9s. One officer shouted, his flashlight blinding me, "Put the baby down and come out slowly." My blood boiled. Put the baby down? Did they think I'd place my newborn on the cold concrete like she was a piece of evidence? I shouted back, "She's staying with me." Last warning. Another officer raised his hand. "Dogs, go." Leashes snapped free. The dogs launched forward, powerful, trained, ready to rip. Their barks shook the night air. My neighbor's lights flicked on, curtains pulled back. They were watching. Always watching, but never stepping in. I lowered my body slightly, angling the baby behind me, and then I did what no one expected. I spoke. Not to the cops. To the dogs. Heel. My voice was sharp, commanding, the exact tone burned into me from years of training. The first German shepherd skidded mid-charge, ears flicking back in confusion. The second slowed, hackles still raised but uncertain. The cops yelled. What the hell? I took a deep breath, forcing authority into every syllable. Platz. I barked the German command. Both dogs froze. One dropped to the ground instantly, muscles rigid. The other circled once, then obeyed, lying flat on the pavement. Silence. My heart thundered, but my face stayed stone cold. I had just taken control of their weapons in front of them, and they didn't even understand how. The baby stirred, let out a soft cry. I rocked her gently, never breaking eye contact with the men who had thought I was powerless. Don't look so surprised, I said evenly. You unleash beasts, but I trained them. You thought you had power tonight, but you handed it to me. Their leader's jaw tightened. His hand hovered near his holster, unsure whether to see me as a threat or a miracle. And I knew, right then, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every time they looked at me and thought, not good enough. I smiled coldly. Gentlemen, do you really want to test the woman who taught soldiers how to control killers? The night air went still. The tables had turned, and the men holding guns suddenly looked like the ones under attack. The dogs obeyed me, not them. That single truth hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. The officers looked rattled, embarrassed, even. Men like that don't like being shown up, especially not by a black woman holding a newborn in her arms. Their leader's jaw clenched as his flashlight beam flicked across my face, then down to the baby, then back up to the obedient K9S lying at my command. How the hell did you do that? One of them barked. I didn't flinch. Years of training. Something you wouldn't understand. The baby whimpered against my chest, sensing my tension. I rocked her gently, whispering, "Sure, Mama's here," but my eyes never left the men in front of me. The leader snapped at his team. "Don't just stand there, get the dogs back under control." Two officers lunged forward, fumbling with the leashes, tugging, shouting commands in English. The dogs didn't move. They glanced at me, waiting, loyal to the voice they trusted. I let the silence stretch, my pulse steady. Control the dogs, and you control the battlefield. That's what they taught me in the desert. That's what I remembered now. Frustration rippled through the squad. One officer spat on the ground. "This is *T. She's messing with us." "Messing with you?" I said sharply, stepping forward just enough for them to feel my presence. "I kept men like you alive overseas. While you slept in your beds, I was out there commanding animals deadlier than these. And now you're aiming your weapons at me?" The leader's eyes narrowed. You need to put that baby down and surrender before this gets ugly." My blood ran hot. "Ugly?" I repeated, voice shaking with a dangerous calm. Ugly was watching friends bleed out in the sand. Ugly was training dogs to take down suicide bombers. This is nothing compared to what I've seen. For a moment, nobody moved. The baby fussed, letting out a tiny cry that cut sharper than any weapon. I pressed my lips to her forehead, my voice dropping low, almost a growl. "You will not touch her." The officers shifted uneasily. They weren't sure what scared them more, the fact that their dogs were under my control, or the fire in my voice that told them I wasn't bluffing. The leader gestured to his men. "Forget the dogs. She's hostile. Prepare to move in." My stomach dropped. So that's how it's going to be. They couldn't beat me with their animals, so now they'd try to break me with force. But they'd forgotten something. I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a veteran. I was a survivor. And if they thought they were walking into an easy arrest, they were about to find out just how much fight I had left. The leader lifted his hand, a silent signal. 2 officers advanced, guns drawn low but ready. Their boots crushed gravel with every step, echoing in the silence that hung between us. I shifted my daughter higher on my chest, shielding her with my body. My heartbeat roared in my ears, but my voice came out calm, commanding. Stop. They didn't. Another step. Another. The kind of steps that dared me to break. I inhaled slowly, just like I used to before sending a dog into hostile terrain. And then, in a tone sharp as a whip, I gave a single order. Fass. The German word for attack. The K9s leapt like lightning. Their handlers screamed in shock as both dogs turned on the very men who thought they owned them. One officer stumbled back, another tripped, shouting as sharp teeth closed inches from his arm, but not biting. Not yet. Because I hadn't given the bite command. I didn't need blood. I needed fear. Control your damn dogs, one officer yelled, scrambling. But they weren't theirs anymore. They were mine. The leader pointed his gun at me, fury etched across his face. Call them off. Right now, or I swear. Or you'll what? I cut in, voice rising. Shoot me. With my baby in my arms. In front of all your neighbors watching from their windows. He faltered. I saw it, the hesitation, the crack in his authority. I stepped forward, the dogs holding their ground like trained soldiers awaiting my next command. My baby whimpered, but I rocked her, keeping my voice low and steady for her, high and lethal for them. You came here to break me, I said. To treat me like I don't belong. But I do belong. More than you'll ever know. While you were learning to bark orders, I was learning to command silence, obedience, and respect. These dogs know it. That's why they listen to me. The leader's hands shook, just slightly. His men shifted uncomfortably, weapons still raised but no longer steady. You want to escalate? I snarled. Then understand this, I don't miss. Not with bullets, and not with commands. Stand down, or I give these dogs an order you'll never forget. The silence stretched. Behind the officers, I caught sight of more shadows, neighbors gathering at their porches, phones held high. They were recording. The world was watching now. The leader swallowed hard, calculating. He could back down, or he could gamble everything on a show of force. Either way, I had the upper hand. And in that moment, with my baby safe against my chest and 2 beasts waiting for my word, I knew the truth. They had unleashed hell. But hell answered to me. The red and blue lights washed over the street, but it wasn't just police who illuminated the night anymore. Porch lights blazed on, cell phones glowed, neighbors whispered in clusters. Their cameras were pointed at me, at the baby in my arms, at the officers frozen by their own dog's obedience. The leader's voice cracked under the weight of it. Turn those cameras off. This is a police operation. Nobody listened. If anything, more phones lifted into the air, capturing every second. I tightened my grip on my daughter and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. They unleashed K9s on a mother and her newborn. My words echoed down the street. But what they didn't know is that I trained dogs deadlier than theirs. I kept soldiers alive with these commands. I served this country while they were still learning how to hold a leash. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She's military?" Another, louder, You can't treat a veteran like this. The leader's face turned crimson. He waved his hand, but his men didn't advance. Not with cameras recording, not with his authority crumbling by the second. I took another step forward, calm, steady, every inch the soldier I once was. Do you know what your mistake was tonight? I asked, my voice razor sharp. You thought I wasn't good enough. Not good enough to deserve respect. Not good enough to be safe in my own home. Not good enough to raise this child. But I am more than enough. I earned it in blood and sweat overseas, and I'll prove it right here, right now. The dogs stayed at my side like loyal soldiers, eyes locked on their handlers, daring them to try something. A woman's voice rang out from the crowd. What's your name? I met her gaze. Sergeant Carter. Former U.S. military K-9 unit. The murmurs swelled into shouts, anger at the police, disbelief at their recklessness. Let her be. She's a veteran. Protect the baby. The tide had turned. The leader lowered his weapon, but his pride was far from surrendered. His voice was bitter. You think this little stunt makes you untouchable? No, I said firmly. It makes me undeniable. And with the eyes of the neighborhood and soon the whole world on me, I knew this was no longer just about survival. It was about exposing the truth. They wanted to make me invisible. Instead, they had given me a stage. And I wasn't about to step off it. By morning, the story was everywhere. Neighbors' shaky cell phone videos had gone viral overnight. News anchors replayed the moment the dogs froze at my command, replayed the crowd's gasp when I revealed my name, replayed the fury in my voice when I said I was undeniable. The headlines cut deep and sharp. Cops unleash K-9s on black mother and baby, veteran turns tables. From battlefield to backyard, woman commands police dogs in viral standoff. And with every headline, the truth spread wider. But not everyone was cheering. My phone buzzed with a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what she'd say. Her voice came brittle, judgment wrapped in concern. What did you do this time, Your sister would never have put herself in a mess like this. My jaw clenched. A mess. Mom, they unleashed dogs on me and your granddaughter. You always exaggerate, she sighed. You're reckless, just like when you joined the military instead of finishing college. Now the whole neighborhood's talking. The news, do you ever think about the family's reputation? For a moment, I couldn't speak. My baby stirred in my arms, soft and warm, reminding me who I was really fighting for. I finally answered, my voice steady. Reputation? Mom, last night wasn't about reputation. It was about survival. It was about proving I'm more than what you think of me. Silence stretched. Then, colder, you'll never be like your sister. Remember that. She hung up. I let the phone fall into my lap. The old wound stung, never enough, never good enough, but something inside me had shifted. Because while my mother's voice echoed in my ear, the world's voice echoed louder. People were marching in front of the police station. Veterans groups were demanding answers. News crews camped on my block, shoving microphones at me, asking how I'd kept my calm, how I'd controlled the dogs, what I thought of the officers who had tried to take me down. For once, they weren't ignoring me. They weren't dismissing me. They were listening. And that terrified the men who had tried to silence me. Behind closed doors, the department scrambled, their press conferences tight-lipped, their words dripping with excuses. Miscommunication. Standard procedure. Unfortunate escalation. But no spin could erase the footage of me standing barefoot, baby in my arms, while their K-9s obeyed my every command. No excuse could undo the truth. The woman they thought wasn't good enough had become the story they couldn't escape. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The first attack wasn't with dogs. It was with words. By the end of the week, a new headline began circulating. Veteran mother staged confrontation, claims police source. Unstable ex-soldier exploits K9 training for publicity. They were painting me as dangerous, unstable, exactly the stereotype they wanted people to believe. I sat on the couch, my daughter nestled against me, while the TV played one of their press conferences. A spokesman in a crisp suit declared, "Our officers followed standard protocol." What we witnessed was a highly trained individual deliberately interfering with police operations. We urge the public not to jump to conclusions. My fists clenched. Deliberately interfering? They had unleashed dogs on a mother holding her baby, and somehow I was the criminal. The baby stirred, her tiny hand curling around my finger. That was all it took to steal me. I wasn't going to let them rewrite my story. But the smear campaign was only the beginning. That night, I noticed a black SUV idling at the corner of my block. No lights on, just sitting there, watching. When I stepped onto the porch, the engine rumbled and the car rolled slowly away. I knew that move. I'd seen it overseas, psychological warfare. Intimidation. Make the target feel small, feel unsafe. They didn't realize who they were dealing with. I shut the door and rocked my baby, whispering, "They think they can scare us, but Mama's seen worse." The next morning, a reporter knocked on my door, trembling with urgency. "Sergeant Carter, have you heard? They've leaked your file." My stomach dropped. "What file?" "Your military record. They're saying you were discharged for insubordination. They're twisting it to make you sound volatile, unfit." I closed my eyes. The memory burned bright, how I had defied an order to release a dog on a civilian overseas, how I had chosen mercy over blind obedience. They had labeled it insubordination. I had called it humanity. Now they were weaponizing it against me. The reporter lowered her voice. "Is it true?" I lifted my chin. "Yes. I disobeyed an order. Because sometimes orders are wrong. I wasn't going to let an innocent man be torn apart to satisfy protocol. If that makes me unfit, so be it. But it also makes me a mother who'll protect her child at any cost." Her eyes widened. She knew she had a story far bigger than the smear campaign. But I also knew what was coming next. If intimidation didn't work, if character assassination didn't silence me, they would escalate. They always escalated. And I had to be ready, because this time, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting my daughter. The night air was heavy, thick with the kind of silence that isn't peace but warning. My daughter finally drifted into sleep, her tiny breaths warm against my chest. I was just about to close my eyes when, bang! A fist slammed against my door. I froze. Another bang followed, louder, more insistent. "Police. Open up." My stomach twisted. They didn't come with warrants at midnight. They came with intentions. Carefully, I placed my baby in her bassinet and pulled the blanket tight around her. I crouched low, my military training kicking in, scanning the windows, the shadows. I counted footsteps, 3, no, 4 outside. A 5th pacing near the back. They thought they were hunting me. I whispered to myself, "Control the dogs, control the battlefield." Only this time, I had no dogs. Just instinct. Another slam shook the frame. "Open the door or we'll breach it." My heart pounded, but my voice was steel. "You want in?" Do it on camera. This whole street is watching. I yanked the curtain back, revealing the glow of neighbors' phones in the dark. Cameras again. Witnesses again. That hesitation, they always faltered under the light. But one of them wasn't hesitating. A shadow moved fast along the side of the house, trying to cut the power. I knew the sound of boots against siding too well. Not tonight. I slipped into the kitchen, grabbed the flashlight I kept taped under the counter, a trick from deployment days. With one sharp beam through the window, I caught him in the act. The crowd outside gasped, shouting, "They're trying to cut her power." The officer froze, caught in the spotlight like prey. His partner hissed, "Get back." But the crowd had seen enough. Voices rose, angry and loud. "Leave her alone. She's got a baby in there. You're trying to kill her." The standoff outside broke into chaos. I returned to the front door, my hands steady, my voice carrying over the noise. "I survived war zones you wouldn't last a day in. You think you can scare me in my own home? No. The only thing you've done is prove exactly what I've been saying. You don't protect, you hunt." The leader's voice cracked in rage. "You're making a mistake, Carter." "No," I said firmly, my hand resting on the bassinet beside me. "The mistake was ever thinking I was powerless." The neighbors' chants grew louder, echoing down the block. More cameras, more witnesses. The officers pulled back, faces twisted with frustration, swallowed by the very spotlight they'd tried to extinguish. But I knew this wasn't victory. Not yet. Because men like that don't retreat forever. They regroup. They retaliate harder. And if they came back again, I had to be ready for a war bigger than me. Only this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about exposing the system that had always told me I wasn't enough and proving once and for all that I was more than they ever imagined. The morning after the midnight raid attempt, my block looked like a press conference. Reporters lined the sidewalks, microphones stretching toward me the moment I stepped out onto my porch with my baby in her sling. Questions fired like bullets. "Sergeant Carter, do you fear for your safety? Do you plan to sue the department? Are you willing to testify before the city council?" I didn't answer them, not yet. My silence was its own weapon. But behind the cameras, I noticed a small cluster of figures who weren't reporters. Men and women in plain clothes, standing tall, their posture familiar. Military. One of them stepped forward, saluting with crisp precision. He said, his voice carrying, "We served with you in Kandahar. We saw what you did over there. You kept us alive. And we're not going to stand by while they tear you down here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The cameras swung toward them like predators scenting blood. For the first time in days, I felt the tight knot in my chest loosen. I wasn't alone. The officers who had tried to silence me were watching from their cars at the end of the block, their radios crackling. Their faces tightened as the veterans spoke louder. "She's not unstable, she's a hero," another said firmly. "The department dishonours her service every time they smear her name." The crowd erupted in shouts of agreement. Reporters swarmed, shoving microphones toward the veterans now, the narrative shifting right in front of the officers' eyes. That afternoon, the legal war began. The department filed charges: obstruction, resisting arrest, weaponizing trained animals. Lies layered on lies. But my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who'd shown up at my door without hesitation, grinned as she flipped through the paperwork. "They just handed us their throat," she said. "Every charge relies on the dogs being theirs. The footage shows they weren't. You didn't weaponize their animals, you exposed their incompetence." The baby stirred in her sling, and I kissed her soft head, whispering, "Mama's fighting for us, baby girl." The fight wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time, the battlefield wasn't one-sided. I had witnesses. I had veterans at my back. I had the truth, sharpened into a blade they couldn't dull. And maybe most importantly, I had something they didn't, something that made me dangerous in a way no smear campaign could erase. I had nothing left to prove. Which meant I had nothing left to fear. The council chamber was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters scribbled in notepads, and rows of citizens filled the seats, buzzing with anticipation. At the front, a long table waited for me. Another, facing mine, held the officers who had turned my street into a battlefield. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces tight with rehearsed professionalism. The baby slept in her carrier beside me, a living reminder of the night they wanted to erase. The chairwoman's gavel cracked against the wood. "This hearing will determine the validity of the charges against Sergeant Carter and review the conduct of the officers involved." The department's attorney stood first, his voice smooth as oil. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed was not bravery but recklessness. Sergeant Carter used specialized commands to interfere with active law enforcement. She endangered herself, her child, and our officers." Murmurs rippled. He gestured toward the footage playing on the big screen, me standing barefoot in the street, baby in arms, dogs freezing mid-charge. "Look closely," he said, pointing. She gave those commands knowingly. That's not coincidence, that's manipulation. I rose slowly, my lawyer nodding at me to take the floor. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice clear. "You're right," I said, eyes sweeping across the chamber. "I did give commands. Not to manipulate. To survive. To protect my baby from dogs you unleashed without hesitation." The footage replayed, this time with sound. The officers' shouts. The leashes snapping. My single word, "Heel." The crowd listened as the snarls cut off mid-charge, the silence deafening. I stepped closer to the microphone. "What you just heard was not manipulation. It was control. Control I learned on the battlefield, where every wrong command cost lives. Control that saved not just me and my baby, but those officers too. Because if those dogs had made contact, someone would have bled." A veteran in uniform rose from the gallery, his voice carrying. "She's telling the truth. I served with her, those commands save lives." Another veteran stood. Then another. The chamber swelled with voices, each one backing me. The chairwoman banged the gavel, but the momentum had shifted. I looked directly at the officers. "You want to talk about endangerment? You endangered a newborn child because you saw her mother as a threat. Not because I had a weapon. Not because I was violent. But because I was black, holding my baby in my own home." The room went silent. Cameras zoomed in. The truth was no longer just my weapon, it was my shield. The attorney sputtered, shuffling his papers. The officers avoided my eyes. And in that silence, I felt the tide turn. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was bigger. And I wasn't just surviving it. I was winning it. The gavel slammed again, calling for order. For hours, testimony had unraveled the officer's narrative. Veterans recounted missions I'd led, moments where my voice had been the thread between life and death. A neighbor described watching the dogs charge, her hands shaking as she spoke into the microphone. Even a retired K-9 trainer admitted under oath, no civilian could have done that. Those dogs didn't obey because she was lucky, they obeyed because they recognized her authority. Now the chamber held its breath. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses, her voice steady. This council finds that the charges against Sergeant Carter are without merit. Furthermore, we find evidence of gross misconduct in the actions of the responding officers. An independent investigation will begin immediately. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, veterans clapped, civilians cheered. The officers' faces drained of color. I sat still for a moment, my baby stirring softly beside me, before the reality sank in. I had not just survived. I had won. Outside, the press swarmed, cameras flashing as microphones closed in. But it wasn't their questions that froze me, it was the voice I heard from the edge of the crowd. Baby girl. My mother. For years, she had measured me against my sister, told me I wasn't good enough, that I needed to work harder, be quieter, settle for less. She stepped forward now, her eyes glossy, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't know what you carried, what you did. I thought, she faltered, pressing a hand to her chest. I thought you weren't strong enough. I held her gaze, every memory of her words flashing through me like broken glass. You were wrong, I said softly, not cruelly, just finally free. She nodded, tears streaming, and for once, there was no rebuttal. That night, the story aired nationwide. Black veteran stops police dogs with one command. Headlines lit up every screen. The narrative they tried to bury me under had become my armor, my proof, my victory. But as I rocked my baby to sleep, I whispered into the quiet, this isn't over. Because power, once revealed, never goes back into hiding. And they had just taught me how unstoppable I truly was. Months later, the headlines had faded, but the echoes remained. The department was under federal investigation. The officers who unleashed the dogs were suspended, their names whispered with shame in the same neighborhoods where they once walked with swagger. My lawyer said lawsuits were coming, and this time, the courts couldn't bury them. I should have felt relief. And I did. But relief wasn't the same as peace. Everywhere I went, people recognized me. Grocery stores, gas stations, airports. Some whispered, some stared, some came forward with gratitude. You spoke for all of us, they said. You showed them. But with recognition came eyes I didn't trust, cars idling too long outside my home, unmarked letters slipped into my mailbox with no return address. They're watching you, a veteran friend warned one evening as we sipped coffee on my porch. The system doesn't forgive. It just waits. I looked at my daughter, now bigger, her fists curled around my dog tags as she slept. And I smiled. Not with fear, but with resolve. They can watch, I said quietly. Let them. I've been a soldier my whole life. What they don't understand is that I'm not fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for her. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant sirens through the night. Once, that sound meant danger. Now, it was a reminder. A reminder that battles end, but wars linger. And as long as they tried to break women like me, mothers like me, voices like mine, I would never stop fighting back.